All right. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to CSINext December presentation program. This is procrastinator session number 3. For those of you that have joined us for the first 2 sessions earlier, thank you very much for joining us again. For those of you that are new to this session, welcome. CSINext is putting on a 4-hour session of programs this afternoon aimed at all the procrastinating shoppers at the end of the year that need their learning units, HSW credits, and all that good stuff we all have to have reported by the end of the year to keep our certifications and all our professional designations. So today we are joined by Robert Miller of Duracrete. Duracrete's long been involved with CSI, so pretty sure most folks here will recognize either Robert or Duracrete themselves. We're going to go for about 45 minutes today, have some time for some question and answer, and then get ready for our next session at 4 o'clock. If you have any questions during the presentation, just go ahead and enter them down in the Q&A box, and we will get to those as we go along or address them at the end. At the end of the seminar, you'll receive a survey link, at which point you can put in your need for an AIA certificate. Please fill that out. If you need a certificate, please enter your number in the area where the AIA is. If you have if you have other certifications that require submission or certificate information, in the comment box at the bottom, just put the organization and the certificate number. We'll get that taken care of. And with this, turn it over to Robert and let him introduce himself and get on with our program today.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction. First, a quick clarification. I am not a direct employee of Duracrete. Many of you know me. I've been pretty involved with CSI Indy for many years in different capacities. I'm actually an independent consultant. I help small businesses like Duracrete with their architectural outreach. I encourage them to join organizations like CSI, AIA, and get these sort of programs in place to help support your community. Because it is so important that you have a basic understanding of some of the products that can help you make the right decisions in the products you're going to choose for your project sites. So that being said, I'm abbreviating this a little bit because I'm used to it being a 55-minute session. So I'm going to take it down a little bit.
Yep. And Joe's joined us also, Robert. So hello,
that?
Joe. I said Mr. Hollowell has joined us
Absolutely.
as well. So
yeah, Joe is the owner of Duracrete. He is with us today as well. And again, part of my goal is to help him understand the architectural outreach, understand how to do it properly. I've been in the industry, the perimeter security industry now for well over 38 years. And one of the things I learned over the course of that experience is how to speak different languages. And what I mean by that is I speak manufacturer, I speak contractor, and I speak architect. So what I do is I help folks like Joe with their outreach because we don't want to get too technical. We don't want to talk about mixed design and concrete and boring things today. We want to talk about your design efforts and how these products can help support those efforts on your project sites. So that being said, we're going to get right to the presentation today. Today's presentation is an AIA accredited presentation. It has the CEU attached as well as an HSW. So those of you who are looking for the 2-for-1, I think this is a fantastic idea, by the way, to do this at the end of the year to help you folks bolster your CEUs that are necessary to keep your licensure in place. So kudos to you for participating today. And we're here to certainly support your industry and help you guys move forward. Everything you see today is, of course, copyright of Duracrete Walls 2023. We will more than happily share this presentation with you. If there's a slide or there's something in here that you want to use to share with one of your customers, by all means, let us know, and we'll get you a copy of that so you can share with your customer appropriately. We're here to talk about the wall. Now, this isn't a building wall or a wall within your facility. This is a wall on the outside, your exterior wall, your perimeter wall, if you will. And historically, walls are an important part of our culture. They are present on many, many sites, historically speaking. I'm sure we could all note a wall in history that you're familiar with or that you've dealt with or you've been a part of or have you witnessed. And they certainly are an important part of our design when we're looking at new projects and coming up with how these products are going to complement our project sites and add to the facility rather than being a nuisance. Again, historically speaking, there are whole cities in Europe that are surrounded by walls. And so from a historical perspective, we use these products for not only the demarcation of that city, but as fortification, as protection, as all sorts of different things, demarcation of where you should start and stop as far as where the property is at. So walls are absolutely important when it comes to your project site. That being said, our learning points today, we're going to understand what walls are made of. Most walls, when we talk about concrete walls, are either going to be wet cast or dry cast systems. We're going to discuss the differences in what wet cast is and what dry cast is, so you have an understanding. The particular wall that Duracrete manufactures is a dry cast product. And we're going to go over the benefits, features, and what the product actually can do for you on your project site. Next, we're going to talk about how a wall serves various layers of security on your project site. Certainly the most obvious is it's a visual barrier. It's private, but it also has some sound attenuation, as resistant to climbing. It can serve higher levels of security, like ballistics or vehicle crash ratings on your project site, if necessary. So a wall, even though it's a single simple line demarking your perimeter, can serve a lot of different layers of your needs on those project sites. Next, we're going to talk about how these products are aesthetically valuable to you. They're going to intrinsically help how they're going to make the site look a little bit nicer, perhaps. But more importantly, how people are going to behave around them. A lot of study has been done with perimeter demarcation, and walls certainly fall into that category. And we're going to talk about some of the psychological effects that utilizing these products has when you're putting them in place on your project site. And then finally, we're going to talk about some of the codes. More than often, you will find that these products are actually required for getting your C of O, for getting the permitting moving forward, especially if you're backing up to a residential, you're putting in a commercial property that's backing up to a residential facility. You got to make sure you have that demarcation in place, and these walls are often specified or required as part of those codes. We're going to review some of the national codes that are available in today's marketplace. But starting at the very beginning, we're going to understand the difference between wet cast and dry cast concrete products. When we talk about concrete, when we talk about cement, we have the tendency to use them together. Please understand that cement and concrete are not the same. Cement would be equivocated to flour if you're making bread, and concrete would be the bread. Cement is only a portion of the chemistry that we are putting together with water and aggregates and other things to produce the concrete. And how we get to that end result has a lot of different chemical solutions we could put together. Just like different kinds of bread are available, there's different kinds of concrete where I could change the water level. I could add more cement. I could add more Portland. I could put in more gravel. I could use different types of gravel. I could use pea stone, all sorts of different things that are going to make that end result concrete be different depending on how I put all of those items together into that recipe, if you will. So all concrete is a combination of those different items to produce the end result of that concrete product. When we talk about concrete, most of the time we're going to think of it in the terms of a wet cast system. Those of you who have ever done a driveway at your home or put in a pad or whatnot are familiar with wet cast concrete. That is when you take a pre-mixed solution of Portland cement, sand, and gravel, you add water to it, it starts that chemical reaction, you mix it up, turns into a slurry, if you will. You pour that slurry down, then you have to smooth it out, put it into forms, etc. Wet cast is certainly very popular for a lot of applications, building roadways, driveways, foundation systems, all sorts of things because of its versatility. But in the wall world, it's a little bit more challenging. So this is why we turn to a dry cast system. A dry cast system is essentially the same mixture, but instead of a lot of water, we're using a very limited amount of water, which is where the word dry process comes from. What we're doing is through vibratory compaction and a drier mix, we are putting together a product into a mold that can now be stripped, and it resembles like putting hard clay. If you've ever been to the beach as a young person, you've made a sandcastle. And you all know that if you put too much water in the bucket with the sand and you dump it over, it's going to slurry right out of there. But if you put just the right amount of water in that bucket and you turn it over and you allow for the water to come out of it and you pull the bucket off, you have a nice form that is made. Now, this is pretty much what's happening here with a dry cast system, but instead of the bucket, we're using a form, we're using vibratory compaction to get all the bubbles out of it. And now I have the ability to produce a plank, if you will, of a dry cast wall system that I could utilize on my project sites for a lot of different needs. The key benefits of dry casting, first and foremost, is better production. I am able to now produce this. I don't know the exact rate, and Joe could probably answer that question if we need to have it asked, but we produce it at a very high rate of speed as far as a manufacturing process, where we're producing those planks one after another, very, very consistently, starting with the second point, which is zero slump. When we pull that form off of there, you all again are familiar with concrete, how it flows into those areas with a lot of moisture inside there. Because it's dry cast, there is zero slump. So when that mold is stripped, it maintains its shape pretty much 100%, which is where the term zero slump comes from. Once we get that done, it's now going into the oven and it's going to be cured. And through that curing process, we have minimal shrinkage. So again, as we're producing this in the factory, I am pretty well assured that every single slat that comes off of that manufacturing facility is going to be consistently manufactured. It has very little tolerance from one slat to the other when it's all finished and put onto your project site. So that minimal shrinkage allows for us to, again, manufacture very quickly, but also have a very consistent product when it's actually installed onto the project site. Next, we have no air entrainment. Because of that vibratory compaction, any bubbles that might be inside the product are removed. They're compacted right out of it. One of the biggest challenges with poured in place walls especially is you have large masses of bubble that might occur, and that will cause for early degradation when it's exposed to the elements, water gets in there, et cetera. So with no air entrainment, it's a much more dense mix that allows us, again, a very solid product when it's all said and done. And most importantly, savings and speed. We can produce this very, very quickly. So we can have the product coming off the line where it's not affecting your project site so much, which kind of brings us to the last benefit, and that is your construction footprint. Traditional walls, when you're putting in a poured in place concrete wall at the back of your facility, it requires a significant amount of formwork and shoring and all sorts of things that have to happen with the foundation that needs to be poured. It is quite a massive footprint on your project site. Even if you're doing block wall, you have to dig out that foundation. You have to put the foundation in place. It's a continuous foundation. You have to now put the block in place, and it becomes a pretty big task, and more importantly, pretty evasive on your project site. With a precast system, all of that is basically being done in the factory. As you see on the left-hand side, that's actually the press that puts these products together. They are pressed out of there. It is all done in the factory. There's no impact on your site whatsoever. The only impact you're going to have is the actual support post, which is on the right side of your screen. You can see that my platform of construction on the site, in that case, this is a pretty robust wall. It's, I believe, about a 12-foot wall that you see in the photograph there with some rather robust foundations. Even with that sort of higher system, a little bit higher segmented system, you're only dealing with 3 or 4 foot of site impact as far as that product when you're putting it installed on your project site. So it gives you some idea here of the values of why we would go with the precast system. The other value that is not listed here is replaceability. If you put in place a cast in place wall and somebody hits it, which inevitably it's probably going to happen, with the precast system, all I have to do is go to the manufacturing facility, make a few more planks, take your broken planks out and put new ones in. At worst case scenario, you may have to pull and replace one of the posts that might be struck, which again, lesser impact on your site as opposed to having to take down a whole big section of wall, either brick, block, or poured in place and remanufacture it, if you will, on that site, which is extremely impacting. So there is a lot of value when it comes to precast, especially being utilized for site demarcation walls.
Hey, Robert.
Yes.
Quick question on that popped up. So in regards to, say, somebody backing into the wall with a forklift or something, if they got too close to it, maybe they put an indent in it, maybe they crack it. So those posts on either side, they act pretty much, I don't know if independently is the right word, but you're saying that you can literally just take one panel out.
Yes.
And put it in.
Absolutely.
Now, typically, is there any, I don't know, would there be like any bracing of the structures or any like lifting of the roof to get that panel out? How would that work?
Essentially what you're doing is those slats are approximately 3 inches thick, 8 inches high by 10 foot long. So you would have to go in there. So let's say they hit the bottom 4 sections. And I'm going to fast forward just so I could kind of show you visually here. let's say on this slide here, they hit the bottom 4 sections below that little squiggle line on the right-hand picture. What you would do is go out to the site, pull out the top 6 sections, pull out the ornamental panel, take out your broken sections, put in repaired new sections in between those posts, and put everything back in place. Generally speaking, all within 1 day. So if you had to repair that wall, if somebody hit it, you'll see some slides later on, like this slide here. This is a project in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Then those of you who are based in Fort Wayne, you recognize where that's at. That wall has been hit a couple of times at that corner. You can see where the new product is versus the old product. Now that product's been up for well over 20 years. So you have some discoloration, things like that are occurring, but you can see where they had damaged panels where they went out, took out the damaged ones, put in new ones. They're a little bit lighter in the photograph there. So they absolutely can be done. One of the things Duracrete is doing as well, moving forward to make it a little bit more versatile, a little bit easier to repair, is having modular post installations where it's a steel post that is textured instead of a concrete post. So even if it does happen to hit the post, now it's just a matter of pulling up 4 bolts rather than pulling up a whole foundation as well. So they're really on the progressive end of developing the product to be as user-friendly as possible.
Oh,
Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Moving on. The layers of security. When we think of a wall, again, just from a perspective, it's supposed to be a visual barrier. That's why we're putting it in place. I don't want to see on the other side, so we're putting in this visual barrier. But it also serves a lot of other layers of security with this very simple system. I mean, when you look at it, it's really just a post and a slat that you're putting in place that could actually do a lot more than just be a sightline demarcation. Again, on the most basic form, it's a visual barrier. I'm putting this product in place because I don't want you to see what's on the other side. They have contract right now with a lot of distribution centers. The distribution center does not want you to see the activities of their trucks inside their facility. So they're putting up a screen wall in part because of the visual barrier qualities that it provides on my project site. It keeps it it's visual security, if you will. The other is sound barriers, noise mitigation. These products are used often in between residential neighborhoods and roadways. Again, those of you that live in the Fort Wayne area that are on this call, you know exactly where that site is at. I believe it's Illinois and Coliseum. Don't quote me on that. But you've driven by it if you live in Fort Wayne. Absolutely. You know where that wall is at. And that wall's intention is to be a noise mitigation barrier. When we talk about noise mitigation, when it comes to walls, there are 2 different aspects of noise mitigation. There's absorption, where the wall actually absorbs the sound waves and deadens them so they don't pass through the wall in a certain fashion. And then there's reflective sound waves, where the wall is going to actually take and reflect some of those waves back or deaden them as the diffraction angle occurs, depending on the height of the wall, to where that person on the other side can't hear it. When we're talking about noise mitigation, sound barriers, I give you a whole presentation just on this topic to give you some perspective of how it works. If I put up a wall that has a 40 decibel level of noise mitigation, what that means is that I have a noise that is 80 decibels. It's going to deaden it by 40 decibels, which 40 decibels to the average person is a quiet conversation. Somebody talking where you can barely hear them. Certainly, if I was whispering on the other side of one of these walls, you would not be able to hear what I'm saying clearly. You might be able to hear just a little bit because I'm very loud, but the average person, you're not going to hear what they're saying on the other side. So they do have an inherent quality of noise mitigation. Please note, if you are working with a system that must have certified noise mitigation, let's have a conversation. There is testing available. There's laboratories that'll get you the actual data, but you want to make sure that you are asking that question up front. Inherently, the product does have some testing data available, but you want to ask about it before you get too far down that rabbit hole. Next, again, inherently, concrete is ballistics rated. If you shoot it with a projectile, it will stop that bullet. When we talk about ballistics ratings, it's a topic of today that we don't like to talk about necessarily because we're thinking about ballistics now at schools and at offices and places we never thought we'd have to worry about ballistics. There's a lot of different ballistics ratings out there. Most of them are going to be about glazing perhaps, or about body armor. And you don't want to confuse them. When we're talking about building components, the ballistics rating you want to be cognizant of and aware of is UL 752. That is my favorite ballistics rating because it is the most cut and dry one. When we talk about body armor and things like that, there's a lot of variables involved with distance and caliber and whatnot. With ballistics ratings here, it's pretty black and white when it comes to a product. We're basically going to say that based on a certain caliber of projectile at a certain velocity, at a certain distance, with a certain number of shots, will yes or no stop the projectile, which is where you get the rating from. Here again, if you are working with a project that needs a ballistics rated wall, we need to have a conversation. The wall inherently has a level 1 rating, just based on the fact that it's a 3-inch piece of concrete. But if you do need something certified, if you need something in writing, you need an engineer involved, we need to have a conversation if you're looking for ballistics rated systems. And now we get to breach resistance. This is actually very personal to me. I serve on the SIA committee for perimeter security terminology. I also serve on the ASTM committee for the F14 force entry resistance for fencing, gates, barriers, walls, all this good stuff. This is a hard measure when it comes to a product. But again, inherently, a wall system is breach resistant. It is very hard to climb over. It is very hard to get through. You're not taking a simple saw and drilling a hole through this and cutting a hole that you could get over very easily. So from a security standpoint, walls are inherently breach resistant. Speaking as a guy, again, who serves the industry as one of the testing agents for the ASTM and SIA requirements, you must have a conversation if you're looking for certified breach resistance. And I'm going to say this one more time when I get to the next level of security, and that is vehicle crash resistance. Here again, we have a lot of global standards. There might be a requirement based on the facility and where you're putting this wall that the wall actually has some level of crash resistance. Here again, just because of the fact that it's a piece of concrete, it is going to have a little bit of resistance level, especially if we're doing a steel post, 10 foot on center. If you crash your car into it, it's probably going to do a pretty good job of stopping that vehicle from getting too far past the wall. But if you're looking for certified resistance, conversation must be had to make sure that it's going to do the job that you want it to do. And inherently, walls have a lot of other features. They don't burn very easily. So if you're looking for fire-rated systems and you have an enclosure perhaps outside of a school or a hospital that you need to make sure does not have any sort of combustible products, concrete does not burn. It's a good shelter from wind and sun and elements. It provides shade naturally. So if you want to protect some equipment perhaps on the other side of this particular wall, it's going to provide shade and keep that sun from beating down on it. And then don't forget, even though the wall is important, you do have to have access, whether it's fire plug access, pedestrian access, vehicle access, etc. You want to make sure you have those access points in place. One of the values that Duracrete brings to the table is they have a full manufacturing facility that will do the access gates and access points as well, either moving and or manual type systems. And then finally, don't forget that these products also serve as a platform for other technologies. Oftentimes when we're dealing with a wall as a perimeter demarcation device, I want to also have cameras perhaps, or lighting perhaps, or other things. Inherently, the wall is a platform for those items as well. It's a great place to mount your cameras. It's a great place to put some lighting perhaps. And again, if you work with them as a manufacturer, you have an opportunity now to use that single line as that platform for a lot of different layers of security on your project site.
Quick question on that, Robert.
Yes.
Yeah. With regards to like using the walls for like lights, cameras, things you want to mount on, I know aesthetically wise, sometimes clients are adverse to having, like a whole bunch of surface mounted type conduits and raceways and things of that nature. Are these walls, or is the configuration, is it available with like a kind of like a hollow core you could use as a chase for conduit like they do with masonry block, like on schools and things of that nature?
No, there is no hollow core. It is solid.
Solid.
You have the opportunity, if you are doing like a chase system,
Mm-hmm.
they have manufactured hollow metal products.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there's going to be any that I will have in the slides to show you today, but you can do like a hollow metal slat.
Mm-hmm.
It comes the raceway now for the IDS or
Okay.
higher voltage systems. Obviously, we put a UL rated conduit inside of that. Right. It could become the conduit where you'd have the concrete slats being stacked, and maybe one of those slats, just like in the fashion of, hold on, we'll go back a slide here. just like in the fashion of this particular slide here, where I have on the right-hand side, that ornamental, that's actually a wet cast ornamental insert there. Instead of it being a wet cast ornamental insert, we would have a metal insert that would become the raceway now for those other systems. And I'm going to show you a slide in a little bit. I'll kind of remind myself of this and show you how this kind of fits into the, oh, here we go. It's right here. Where you could put like that metal louvers on top of the wall.
Yep.
I could have that raceway right inside of there.
Ah, got it.
And run my electrical, run low voltage, higher voltage systems, et cetera. And again, these are where conversations need to be had. I'm going to say that over and over again. Just make sure we understand that if we're putting in a raceway for a higher voltage product, that the rating of the conduit it's within is for that site. So
correct.
Again, let's make sure we're having the right conversations at the right times. Which brings us now to this portion of the presentation. Is the site aesthetics and how they complement that, but more importantly, how they affect behavior. Aesthetically, walls can be beautiful. They are important. They are there. We have to have them sometimes, but this is a great opportunity to work with your landscape architect, your civil engineer, and make these products not only functional, but aesthetically part of the facility. Whereas we're taking, and now it's a complementary landscape feature that is also very functional on my project site. This wall that you see in the picture right now, it's a beautiful gray looking wall. It is precast slat. They put in a red strip. What you don't see, and unfortunately the picture, I just couldn't stand back far enough. The building has red striping and other features that is complementing. So now that really simple wall is part of the facility and is complementing it. And then again, working with the landscape architect, we have some plantings there, keeps people away from trying to climb it and peek over it. It has planter boxes, and that picture actually is taken, I believe, more late fall, but they put flowers in there in the summer. So again, it can be a complementary feature for your site, not just a wall anymore. And if you really want to get crazy, you can start adding texture and color and all sorts of different things. It takes the stains very nicely. On the left side of the screen there, you see Milwaukee Junction. I believe that is a reclamation yard for scrapyard, if you will, that's on the way to Milwaukee Junction. As you can see, there's some razor coil. It's a pretty high security little facility, but they didn't want it to look like that. So they had somebody commissioned to come in and actually stain the wall and put some paint on the wall, intentional graffiti, if you will, to make it part of the environment. On the right there, that is a stain that they had after the fact that matches the building. Not the color I'd pick for my house, certainly, but it matches that facility. It adds to that particular, that restaurant. That's their theme. That's their color. They're a waterfront facility. They have that aqua blue, the walls matching it, and it's the same sort of precast system. And then again, this is where the fabrication, those platforms, this is another slide that kind of demonstrates that on the left side there, that Russell Island ferry landing, that is actually a piece of aluminum. And what you don't see is that at nights, there's a blue sleeve in there, and they have low voltage lighting that goes inside there and illuminates that blue sleeve. So now it's a functional light that's part of that precast wall system. And again, if you want to start having it to where you're running conduits, things like that, they can actually make that a part of the wall where it's, the full 8 inches, maybe 12 inches high, or make it even super thin. So it only is a raceway. It's only something that's at the bottom slat or right at, the second from the bottom slat, or maybe the top slat that's framing it in and becomes part of that raceway for that external technologies you're putting in place. And certainly the other value is it is a modular enclosure system, primarily used for dumpster enclosures, mechanical enclosures, things like that. This gives you a really good versatile option when you're looking at, especially for school districts. I've talked to a lot of schools over the years, and one of the challenges they have is things change. Administrations change, the coaching changes, their football team gets better, gets worse, they move things around. If I had the ability now to start moving things on my site and maintain ownership of it, it gives me more versatility. So if I could take this enclosure, pick it up because it is completely modular, and move it to the other side of my facility because things changed, I could do that. So if this is where maybe we're storing our marching band's equipment or the football equipment, and this year the marching band just says, they got a lot of funds and they're growing, so we're going to expand this. It's easy to expand and add to that enclosure. Certainly on a basic level, these enclosures could also be used for dumpsters, grease traps, mechanical, et cetera, where it gives you that versatility of placement on your project site. We'll talk about their actual product a little bit later and how this really can help support your efforts when you're designing these systems. Moving along though, SEPTED. I'm actually a SEPTED practitioner myself. A lot of what I do when I'm working with an architect or engineer is we talk about SEPTED first, and that is crime prevention through environmental design. That is doing things on purpose, not just for a purpose. It is very purposefully putting the wall at a certain point, at a certain place, because it's going to do something and affect how people behave. These products can be very, very powerful on our project sites. Those of you who have seen my presentation before, I talk about privacy, and I talk about how powerful privacy can be. And one of the examples that I use is a study that was done in the New York Times back in 2005 that talked about the Berlin Wall, one of the most famous walls in history. We all know the history, you all know the story. But what's interesting about the story itself is in 2005, when they interviewed some of the people who were present when the wall came down. And you have to remember history. When the wall came down in 1988, 1989, whatever it was, the people who were there with the sledgehammers were young people. They were people who were born after the wall went up. They had no idea what was on the other side. So they created a fantasy world on the other side of this wall that they thought existed. And when the wall came down, they went through the hole in the wall and looked around and said, wait a minute, it's not what I thought. I thought there was a building over here. I thought there was a store off in the distance, and it wasn't present. Now, what's crazy about this article and what I got out of it personally was in 2005, when they interviewed those same people, the fantasy world that they created in their mind still existed, even though they saw reality. That is how powerful privacy can be. So when you're looking at the private function of these products, keep that in mind. Next, we're going to talk about the security factor and how it makes people feel secure. Great study done in 2006 by ASLA. Some of you in the audience are probably members of ASLA. Talked about the psychological and physical influence that a perimeter product can have in place, whether it's a wall, a fence, or whatnot. And they talked about preschool children. And essentially what it said is when the kids were in an enclosed area, when the playground was enclosed, they behaved freer. They felt safer. They ventured away from the teacher, from the outside assistant a little bit more when they knew where their boundary was at. When they took the fence down and there was no boundary, the kids were a little more scared and they stayed closer to the teacher. So again, these products absolutely have a factor in how people behave around them. If you're putting this around a school, the kids are going to act differently knowing where their boundary's at than if the boundary's not in place. Protection. A study in the UK talks about how these products intrinsically make people feel a certain way. If I put a fence around my facility and I put signs all around that say danger, keep out, you know exactly where my line's at. You know what my intentions are by putting that tangible marker in place. You know that you're not supposed to get through that wall or on that wall. On a societal level, if you were to put a wall in between a residential facility and a commercial facility, and for some reason somebody made a mistake and they moved that wall 1 foot into your property as a commercial owner, and that residential owner now has an extra foot of property in the back of their yard, do they not touch it? Do they not leave it? No, they absolutely don't. They use it. They're going to start planting bushes there. They're going to start, it becomes theirs because the boundary was moved. Even though on paper, if you go to the city hall, it says that the line is a foot back, that becomes their boundary because we moved the physical boundary a foot out. So it absolutely has an emotional role in how we deal with it and a privacy and social interaction standpoint. Again, those of you who have seen my other presentations, I talk about my neighbor. I lived in my house now for 15 years and I can't stand my neighbor. I didn't like him the day I moved in. I don't like him today. That's just the way it is. But we get along because I have a privacy fence. I have a private demarcation in between our properties. I don't have to see him every day. He doesn't have to see me. We don't have to interact because that wall is in place between us. Changes the way we behave. And then most importantly, it provides peace of mind. If you are a distribution facility and you put a 20-foot high wall around your facility, even though you know that somebody could go get a 21-foot ladder and climb that wall, it makes you feel a little bit more comfortable knowing that that demarcation is in place and that you know how people are going to act when that wall is doing its job in protecting and providing security for my facility. And then certainly there's that aesthetic component, again, an emotional component. They can be made to be beautiful. They can be made to be part of my site. They could be, again, add into there's some signage perhaps or lighting or other features the plantings. These products absolutely need to be worked with your landscape architecture because they're on that perimeter, and I can, again, bolster and make it look so beautiful on my perimeter. It's not just a wall anymore. It's part of my environment that I'm working in. I always, as a lifelong fence person, one of the things I always hear is good fences make good neighbors, which is a Robert Frost poem. I did not realize that until I started collaborating with Joe over here at Duracrete, that the title of the poem is actually Mending Wall. I've said that probably 1,000 times in my career over 38 years, never realizing what the title of the poem was. And when we were talking about that good fences make good neighbors, the realization that he was actually talking about a wall and not a fence was interesting. So it kind of brings it to full culmination that, historically, again, these products are powerful. They do have an impact on our site. And even from an inspirational standpoint, Robert Frost made a statement that we use in our fence industry now pretty much every single day. Any questions? Moving along.
No, we're moving along fine, Robert.
Perfect. I'm right on time too. I abbreviated just the right amount of time here. Municipal codes that are available. Oftentimes you're going to see that these products are required. Make sure you understand that if you need help, there is a full staff of people available to assist you in making sure that the products that are present are going to meet those codes and requirements, whether it's a simple dumpster enclosure or a demarcation wall or whatever it might be. Every municipality has their own standard when it comes to what they want in that municipality. So make sure you understand them. And some of them are actually pretty fun. I get really involved with a lot of this when I'm doing some of my design consultations and trying to find the right products that meet those requirements. Those requirements often could be something as simple as a dumpster enclosure, where you're producing the three sides and a gate to keep the dumpster from being exposed, from trash from blowing around, mechanical enclosure requirements, et cetera. Some of the requirements that are present on a national level. This is from Monroe, North Carolina, where it is essentially calling for, and I'm looking to the side because I can't read my screen without my glasses on. It's calling for a fully enclosed wall with a minimum height of 8 foot to block 100% of the view of the enclosed area. That is their code requirement. The rest of it comes into play with the gates, the hinges, et cetera. But essentially, they're talking about a simple dumpster enclosure, that this product meets those requirements 100%. Another standard here for a trash enclosure. This is Los Angeles, California. It's very similar. It requires that it's a masonry wall, approximately 6 foot high with a solid roof. A little bit different. You have to have a roof on top of the enclosure in LA, which is a requirement to prevent rainwater from getting into the dumpster and leaching into the groundwater system. But essentially, it's the same sort of thing. Now, they're calling for masonry here only because they don't know that precast exists. And precast essentially is a masonry concrete unit. So it would absolutely fit those requirements. What you don't see in the photograph here is that cap that goes on there because LA requires a slanted cap to have the rainwater run off of it. This is the ordinance here for East Point, Michigan, right down the street from where we're at. It requires all parking districts and service districts for offices, light industrial districts, any zoning areas to have a 6 foot wall in between them and the residential area. Essentially, what we're talking about is if you put in an office facility here, this is a medical office facility. In between that and the residence, which you can see on the other side, the right side of that photograph there, that demarcation wall has to be in place. Back to what I said about footprint, you can see by the picture here, just on the construction flow that was occurring, they didn't have much room to move when putting in that wall, especially considering that the residents that are on the right side of that wall were existing when they were building the brand new medical office building on the left side. So you can see where the precast concrete became very, very valuable to them when making that particular facility. And then we have Louisville, Texas here. Again, requirements for screen walls in between residential and non-residential areas, between single family and multifamily facilities, where again, you're just putting that product in place. Another opportunity to add plantings and beautification, meeting those code requirements as written by those different municipalities. And then this one here is a good one. This is solid waste enclosure system for Louisville, Texas as well, which is kind of a continuation of that. And in this case here, it actually just says a non-combustible material. masonry is recommended, but wood is not permitted. So you can't put in a wood enclosure, certainly aren't putting in a vinyl enclosure, but you're now putting in a concrete robust system that might be behind there to serve those needs appropriately. Any questions?
Yeah, I got a couple.
Okay.
The back in the beginning, you were talking about the sound mitigation.
Yes.
And it may even involve an acoustical consultant, but is there product data available from Duracrete that shows what you were talking about, the sound reduction and the diagram, I'm just going to call it, of which way the sound goes based on the design?
Yes, they have had their product tested at an independent lab, where they actually have the data of their standard 2.5-inch wall, of what reduction it has of decibels. It was done by like an independent testing for the product. If you have a specific need where we're changing heights and you want to make sure that it is meeting those requirements, talk to them, talk to their engineering department, because they'll make sure that they're flexible to get the right products in place for you. Because again, as we talked before, not only does the product absorb, but it deflects. So sometimes your deflection will be accomplished by going a 2 foot higher, and that will help deaden the sound a little bit more. From a 6 foot wall to an 8 foot wall has more sound attenuation simply based on the height. So they'll help you with that. So if there's a specific need, have the conversation. If you're just looking for that data to say, hey, what does a 6 foot wall do? So you can tell the residents behind there, he has that data. They have tested the product 100%. Absolutely.
Okay. Is there any type of limitations as to the coatings that can go on the outside of the wall, as far as like finishes like paint, anything like that? Any type of limitations on what can and what can't be applied?
Two-part answer for you here. First of all, if you are looking to prevent it, we can do an additive that has anti-graffiti additives or coatings that we can put on there. If you are looking to actually paint it, again, make sure we have the conversation. So if you're going to do a mural on it, or if you're going to have a special color, it will take most stains. I will defer that answer, though, to a professional at Sherwin-Williams or another paint company, DuPont or whoever, to make sure that the product is going to stick. What is important is that we understand the actual aggregate and the absorption of that stain, which I'd recommend using a concrete stain and adhesion to the aggregate that we're using. So let's make sure we have that conversation up front again before we put it on paper. Don't just say, hey, put this wall in and paint it blue. Let's have the conversation so the right product is going to be applied to accomplish that goal.
Yeah, and I think that leads us into our next one here that I see up front early. What type of consultations, design assist, what type of involvement can Duracrete offer as far as that type of involvement early on a project, whether it be with an architect or a construction manager, a client? What type of capabilities?
You baited me up for the next slide. Let me get this set here. And this is my 5-minute slideshow. Play from the start, which this is your 5-minute Duracrete wall commercial. Duracrete wall is a small manufacturer based in Warren, Michigan. They've been producing this wall now for well over 25 years. The previous owner, who happened to be Joe's dad, kind of let it be its own entity. It did its thing. It was small. He left it alone. Joe has decided to take it to another level. And in doing so, is part of the thing is the architectural outreach and understanding the language that you folks speak. So what he has done is he has hired a full-time staff of design professionals that understand the product and can help you make sure you're going to put it on the ground right. So he has a full-time staff that'll help you not only with the product capabilities, any of those questions you have up front, but also the most important thing, that's the budget information. They're going to help you make sure that this is within budget and going to serve the needs of the site appropriately, so that not only is it going to be aesthetically pleasing and functional and maybe have some sound attenuation, but do you know how much it's going to cost you before it gets onto the site? The 25 years that they did spend, they did a lot of the installations themselves. They have a whole installation division as well, which kind of brings me to their go-to-market strategy. it's hard for them obviously to mobilize a crew to go down to Indianapolis to install a wall. They can do it if they want to, but they do have installation partners in markets like Indianapolis. I know there's a newer company called Safeguard Solutions. There is, what's her name's up north out of Fishers. Bullseye Fence has installed their product. Capital City Fence has installed their product before. So they're willing to sell to them. They also will sell direct to your smaller construction managers. So if they don't want to hire a fence contractor, they're already doing those things on site. They're capable of putting in a pad and mounting these bolts to the floor. They'll sell it direct to that small manufacturer so they can put it in themselves if they need, or small general contractor so they can put it in themselves if they need. So really good go-to-market strategy with their products overall. Essentially what they produce is a dry cast slat. It is that simple. They produce a singular product that is very, very versatile. That is the product that comes off the line. Again, we could change the textures and stuff like that a little bit, but essentially that's what you're getting. The rest of it comes from the fabrication end of their business, where they are going to actually produce the gates, the post, and all the little pieces that become the entire system. When you're talking about a dumpster enclosure, as an example, one of the innovations that Joe came up with is a ready-to-ship, immediate install enclosure product, where as a designer, you know when these products are coming into play at the very end of the project. When everything else is done, they're already demobilized half the time. And oops, we forgot the dumpster enclosure.
Dumpster enclosure.
Yeah. So
Been
what
there.
Joe came up with is a system that if you already have a concrete pad that's a minimum of 6 inches thick, or you plan on a concrete pad, and we're going to keep the dumpster enclosure off until the very end, right before our C of O, you could have this entire system shipped on a pallet and installed in less than probably 4 or 5 hours. Literally, as long as it takes you to drill 16 holes, mount those steel plates down, and put it in place, put the slats in. The slats kind of stack up. It's already pre-drilled and pre-ready for all the hinges and the hardware for the gates and everything. The gates are already pre-manufactured. You're literally, I don't want to belittle it too much by any means, but it's an IKEA assembly on your project site, where with a couple of drills and some impact wrenches, you'd have the product up. His timing right now is he anticipates 4 hours for a typical enclosure from arriving to the site to completion.
That's
if you're not experienced, might take you 6 or 8. That's up to you.
Yeah. And I think we got one last one here.
Sure.
Resilience. It's kind of like related to resilience and resistance. I showed a picture a couple slides ago where you had like a tree like around a dumpster enclosure, or some of the landscaping up around the walls. How is, and let's just say this is just an unfinished wall, how resistant is it to things like tree sap, things that just exist in the everyday world? I know, like when trees get close to things, they tend to muck some stuff up.
Yep. Essentially, it's concrete. So it's going to be like anything. If it's sap and it's dripping on the wall, it's going to stick to it.
Yeah.
So, that's the sort of thing. If you actually put a graffiti resistant coating on there, it will help with tree sap. So if you have a lot of pines in the area and that's going to happen, put a graffiti resistant coating on there, and it'll help rinse that off a little bit better. Same with bird droppings, things like that. The only thing I can tell you that is dangerous for any concrete system is glycol. If you have any sort of glycol that you're using for de-icing in any capacity, don't put this wall up, because it will degrade it.
It will degrade it.
The glycols essentially what they're doing is they're absorbing the water out of it, and it makes it very, very brittle, and it'll fall apart.
Okay.
So if you're using glycols, that's the only thing I'd recommend. If you're using that to, obviously they use it at airports a lot, but if you're using glycol on the facility and you know that they're going to de-ice in that area with glycols, don't put this wall, because it will eat at the bottom of that wall.
All right. Well, Robert, Joe, thank you very much for this topic, this presentation. Very informative. Learned a few things I did not even know were possible with precast walls. Folks, you'll be receiving a link here for a survey. Again, just put all your information in there, your AIA numbers, any additional information down at the bottom, and we will get that all sent off to Robert and his folks and get get all the units reported. And if there are no other questions, Robert, if there's anything you'd like to wrap up with, again, thank you. This was great.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us today. One last note for you. If you like today's presentation and you were the one who was the last minute person waiting for this unit, but you think it'd be valuable for the rest of your team, by all means, reach out and we will get you scheduled for a live lunch and learn. We'll bring you lunch. We'll get you the educational program set up and come right to your office for the rest of your staff, perhaps, to get them some credit units. Certainly free lunch is never a bad thing. And quite frankly, we did cut out a couple of slides here. So there's a little bit more content. You might get something new out of it. Presentations do evolve as things change. And so sometimes you can do the same presentation 3 times, see it 3 times in a row and get something new out of it every time. So I'd encourage you to reach out to Joe or myself and we'll get you scheduled for a live lunch and learn after the first of the year, once you get your certification back up.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us. Keep your eyes on the horizon for CSINext presentation chapter meeting coming up in January after the start of the new year. And Joe, Robert, thank you. Everybody on the call. Happy holidays, safe travels, happy new year, and we'll see you next time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.